Happy to have you back in 2021, and we're discussing what might seem like a little bit of a granular issue, but it could have broad sweeping implications on policy moving forward. And that is a recent rule change in the U.S. House of Representatives relative to PAYGO. And before we jump into what that rule change was, I just want to cover a couple general bases here and ask you, what is PAYGO and when does it apply?
Yeah, PAYGO stands for pay as you go. And it was a concept that came out of budget reforms from the 1990s. And it basically said if you're going to add to mandatory spending, those are the some call them entitlement programs. They're the ones that run on autopilot that don't go through the regular appropriations process. And that is the bulk of the federal budget. I mean, over 50% of the federal budget is on autopilot, and so it's the entitlement programs and net interest on the debt. And so the rule is that if you're going to add to that, you need to offset it somehow with a mandatory spending cut or a revenue increase, a tax increase. Now, automatic increases don't count under PAYGO. That is to say, Social Security is going to cost more next year than it did last year. And that's true because there are more of us baby boomers retiring. And so it automatically goes up in cost. That's not covered by PAYGO. That automatic cost is going to happen. It's like if Congress wanted to pass a new rule and enhance Social Security benefits or Medicare or anything and create a new entitlement program, it would have to, under PAYGO, find some way to pay for that by either cutting other spending or raising revenue. The same thing is true on the revenue side. If you're going to cut taxes, the rule was that you needed to cut spending by a similar amount or raise some other revenue somewhere else in the tax code. So the idea was that revenue and mandatory spending should be deficit neutral. So it does not apply to discretionary spending. The 12 annual appropriations bills that go through Congress, you deal with those by budget caps if you want to do something, but PAYGO does not apply to that part of the budget, which is about a third of the budget.
All right, so let's talk about this particular change. I'm assuming I think it's an exception or a couple exceptions to the rule that would bypass any process needed to waive PAYGO?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to define what PAYGO is going to apply to. And in this current environment, the new House rule makes it clear that PAYGO should not apply to things that are enacted to address the pandemic, emergency spending. That's something that I think is pretty much universally accepted, even by advocates of PAYGO, that you don't need to spend for something that's intended to address. You don't need to pay for something that is intended to address an emergency. Another matter that came in, another exception, and this is new, is something that's intended to address climate change, and that's much more amorphous. And I think as a matter of looking at PAYGO, that could be such an enormous exception that it would really swallow the rule.